I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service agency, Electric. And today I'm talking with Michael Charleston, senior e-commerce product manager at Nordic Naturals, and actually recently a new Electric client. So super excited to have you on here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brandon.
So before we jump into some topics here, can you give everybody just a quick background and an intro on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Sort of interesting background. So I'll give you the down and dirty. For the first 9 years of my professional career, I was actually a recruiter. During that time, fulfilled my entrepreneurial desire, so to speak, by having various side projects, and that's when I sort of realized that that's the direction I wanted to go. Basically, solve problems that I thought were interesting in unique ways. Also figured that I wasn't going to really get that in recruiting, so moved careers. Later in my career, I got an opportunity to move into one of the company I was employed at, move into more of a brand management, product marketing role. Did that for a short period. Then sort of started getting into the e-commerce side of things a little more thoroughly, including working on the technical operations warehouse side, which I thought was really interesting and great foundation for me to set up my career in e-commerce. Today, I'm as you mentioned, the product manager here at Nordic Naturals. So I'm in this interesting environment where I'm tech in a non-tech environment. But it's been, I made at some point the decision to get out of the startup world and get something a little more stable. What's been great is Nordic's kind of the best of both worlds. Nordic Naturals, we're the #1 fish oil brand in the US. There's a ton of brand equity already there, whereas before I'm trying to figure out how to get products off the floor and launch them. That was already there with our users. But traditionally a big box retailer brand. So really I've come on to initially do a Shopify migration, and we elected going with a headless Shopify migration. So I've learned a ton, been able to help shape the team and the approach that we're taking to grow our brand in the DTC world.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, the different sort of approach that you can take when you are working with an established brand that already has like great traction. And that's sort of where we come in as well from a retention side. If you don't have any customers, anything we're doing isn't going to be beneficial for you. So it's a different approach to things. You can really focus on how do you improve customer experience and dig into the retention side versus we don't even have any customers. We don't even know if customers like our product and all the other stuff that goes into getting a brand off the ground and running.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We came into an environment where we had various questionable technical decisions made over the last 10 or so years. And that led to a very dated and poor user experience on our site. Again, wasn't really the focus initially. And our site took 8 seconds to render anything on a browser. White screen for 8 seconds. We still had something like a 4% conversion rate. And that told me that, no matter what, there was a set of users here that just wanted to buy our product no matter what impediments we put in their way. So it was a cool experience being able to focus on some more high impact things other than just trying to build a brand in an incremental way. We could focus on, okay, great. Like, how do we increase subscriptions? How do we build some of these retention pieces that are so important to building a strong brand?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about working in this space as we've gotten bigger, start to get to work with some of the larger companies like yourself is that we already might be a user or a consumer of said product with whomever the brand is that we're working with. So like, I think we first started talking to you like a year and a half ago. Like there's fish oils in my fridge and they have Nordic Naturals label on it. And it's cool to be able to be using something or grow up with something and then to actually start to get to work with them as well. And I know when we started working with American Girl Doll, there was a whole host of team members that were super excited about it. Not necessarily applicable for me, but it's cool just to get to see the team get really excited to work with something because they have used it in the past. And I think that sort of connection is pretty neat.
The one point on that, because I think also important, at least for me in my career, has been working. I didn't take fish oil before I worked at Nordic Naturals. Before I worked at some of my other companies, I wasn't necessarily a customer either. However, there is a when you get to Nordic Naturals, for instance, you discover how important quality is to the brand, and how reputable the brand is, and how I probably 75% of the people I mentioned Nordic Naturals to either have it or have heard of the brand, and having that sort of baseline respect, I guess, or people know the brand and they respect it and they see the quality. That's so important. It helps you get behind what you're doing, and have faith in selling. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're doing is selling, right? We're salespeople, and we're a little different, but that's what we're doing. And it gives you a little more confidence in selling that product.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're at a point now where we can be more selective with who we work with. And so if we don't necessarily think it might be the best fit, or maybe the product we're just not like a big believer in, because I know in the early days of electric, like I would work with quite literally anybody. And there were some products where I'm like, I don't like this at all. And I don't know how anybody else could. But there's so many things that go into a brand, and like you can only do so much email and text. Doesn't really matter if the product isn't good, or if the quality isn't there, or if customer service isn't in a good place. There's so many different aspects to building a strong brand, especially when you're omnichannel and not just D2C. It's really cool to see companies like yourself and some other ones where it all sort of ties in together nicely. And sure, I'm sure there's things that you're always trying to improve upon, and not everything is perfect, but there's just so many different components to a business that go into it being successful.
Yeah, you actually touched upon 2 points that I'd love to dig into a little more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That the customer service aspect, and I'll kind of just put it more broadly, the post sales experience. As I mentioned early on in my e-commerce career, one of my roles was to work at the warehouse level. I was doing technical integrations between a proprietary e-commerce system and SAP, which is, for people that don't know, is an ERP system, and the various kind of ancillary tools that go with fulfilling orders at the warehouse level. We, as e-commerce and marketing folks, we see numbers on a screen, we see Google Analytics, we see counts of users, we see figures of dollars and order counts, and it's easy to lose sight of the fact of what that all means. And when you get down at the warehouse level and you see each one of those things is someone picking product, it's an individual going down an aisle and picking product and putting it in a pick cart and sending it over to their packaging, and there's a whole life cycle of that order. It really, just for me at least, it gave me such great insight and perspective that I've retained to this day. And I've met so many folks that are that talk about having an idea, or they've launched an idea and they're selling on Shopify, and there might be in various levels of development, or maturity for their product. And many of those folks, they're hyper focused on the front end of that, right? The front end being like, how do I get more customers? How do I market my product? How do I sell more? And they don't really focus on that post sale experience. They don't focus on finding the right fulfillment partner, understanding what integrations need to happen between Shopify, if the people are on Shopify, which I think both of us would recommend, and how that order gets from Shopify to the warehouse. Understanding, hey, maybe Shopify isn't the best order management system. Maybe you need a middleware to do that. Understanding how all of that integrates with a customer service platform such as Gorgeous or Zendesk, and then having the people that answer customer service emails and messages and rectify issues for customers. I dabble a little in some of the various Shopify and e-commerce subreddits, and something that just comes up so consistently is this idea of lost orders, right? Like, an order is sent out and it's not delivered to a customer, and the customer says, I didn't receive it. And it's so funny to me that the first place people start is like, that person's trying to con me. And at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as someone that's selling product to make sure that product gets to that person. And so you need to make sure that you create the right partnerships all the way downstream to ensure that you have tightened operations. And then, things are going to happen. Just rectify them. At the end of the day, it's not going to affect your business. What is going to affect your business, however, is when you tell that person, I'm not going to send it to you because I already sent it, and they file a chargeback and still win it, but now they get to write a review about how bad you are. So at the end of the day, just focusing on that post-sale experience and giving the customer the benefit of the doubt, and giving them, frankly, what they expect now in the e-commerce world, right? They don't.
Yeah.
Even if it's Black Friday, it should not be taking 5 days to ship my order, right? So I always tell folks when they're looking for fulfillment partners, do not pick the cheapest. There's a reason they're the cheapest.
The cheapest usually will cause you problems later on down the road. And we've lost plenty of Shopify development deals to others, and then we have to work with them again in 6 months. As one example. But I also think there isn't enough attention or focus paid toward customer service as a revenue driving channel versus a cost center. Like historically, and even I remember hearing this from brands even like a couple months ago now, is like, how do we get our customer service costs lower? Because we're trying to improve margins. It's like, well, you're going to sacrifice on the quality of your customer service. That's going to have ripple effects throughout the rest of your business. And maybe you should be looking at customer service more as customer experience and focus on how you can invest in it and actually drive like a return. And there was some study that even if you have a bad experience with a brand, but then they go out of their way to make it right for you, then you're more likely to have a higher lifetime value with that company. And then you'll also share it. Like you'll tell people, about the great experience that you had. So I think people have for some reason like overcomplicated it, when really it just comes down to thinking about how you would want to engage and interact with a brand. And it's like simple stuff. Like, no, you don't want to call into a helpline and then sit there for an hour and a half to wait to like change your airline ticket or something like that.
Right.
Like, obviously. Or if I want to return a product, I don't want to have to pay for a $25 shipping return and then have like, I don't know, all these various steps to go through to prove that I actually did this or that. And so I think a lot of brands just need to simplify things and focus on having a positive customer experience.
Absolutely. There's a couple things there. What we're currently experiencing or experimenting with, at Nordic, is a proactive chat so we use Zendesk, which is fine. I do like Gorgeous. Shout out to Gorgeous. But we're more of a legacy company in a lot of respects. But Zendesk has been, as far as I know, pretty okay for us. But we are using a proactive chat trigger that we're experimenting with. And that goes kind of hand in hand with this idea of making, or at least adding some revenue generating aspects to the customer service side. And we're playing around. We're going to see how it goes, but I think like there's a lot of really interesting things that brands are doing to think of customer service in a more thoughtful, experiential way, as opposed to just someone that's answering tickets and trying to churn things out.
Yeah, and the ones that are doing so are reaping the benefits, I think.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head too when you mentioned just sort of like flexibility and really just taking care of the customer. And I think that's like a thematically that applies to a lot of areas. I mean, you and I obviously both work very closely with Recharge. And one of the things that came out of the last ChargeX convention was the fact that when you offer your customers flexibility, when you offer them the ability to easily manage their subscription, and that includes canceling, that the customer LTV goes up, right? And I think about the early days of subscription boxes, which I was part of the company that was in those early days, and the question that came up was, how easy do we want to make it to cancel? Do we want to make it so that they have to call in? And I'm so glad that we're not having those conversations anymore, at least in the aggregate, right? Like I'm sure there's people that are having those conversations. I would strongly urge those people to not do that. Make it easy for your customers and then try to win them back later. Because if you make it difficult, you're not going to win them back.
Yeah, I mean, there's some retention tactics you can put in place in the cancellation process that still make it easy, but also offer the opportunity to continue the engagement with the brand if you desire. Like very simply, would you rather just skip instead of cancel? And one button, like that's not going to cause anybody headaches. A lot of brands that I've spoken to, especially more like legacy industries, and with drinks acquisition, talking to a lot more like wineries and alcohol brands. And they're like, we don't even let customers cancel unless they like call into our help center. And then they like have to wait on the phone to cancel. I'm like, what are you talking about? Your customers are going to hate you. And they're going to tell everybody that you have to call in to even do this, which is just unacceptable in today's age for any sort of commerce transaction happening over the internet. And all the data shows too that the lifetime value for customers who skip an order or who take actions on their subscription programs is higher than those that do not. So the old premise of let's sneak people into a subscription with like $1 intro offer, and then we're going to hit their credit card until they realize, holy shit, and then we'll just sort of churn through like that for a while. That doesn't work anymore. And gives you a whole host of problems when it comes to the customer service aspect of things. And you never want to end up, I don't think, in like a reputation management crisis, which I've seen brands had to deal with in the past when some of the more like, I'd say, shady acquisition tactics were deployed. Yep. But
yeah, I'd also urge people use your upcoming order notification actively with your customers. Make sure you're being extremely transparent that you're going to charge them, and there's an order that's going to be generated. We actually use that now to we work with ARPU, which I know you're familiar with, and we've got delay blocks in there. So we have specific CTAs very high up in the email that allows people quick ability to delay their subscription. So as opposed to clicking a CTA, then clicking a date, we give you the ability, the customer, to delay 2 weeks or delay 4 weeks, and be done with it. And we've seen some really interesting things there. I mean, people are engaging with it actively. We've had to play around with the dates a little bit, and that's been really interesting. But we've seen a huge increase in LTV.
Yeah, that upcoming order notification is a great spot for those upsells or cross sells as well. Getting different product adoption through, and then even leveraging things like recharge SMS, where you don't even have to go into your account or do anything. You just literally reply with a number, and then magically the action takes place in your on your subscription. So I think it's like anything else, the brands that aren't afraid to get creative and go a little bit against the norm, or implement things that aren't necessarily standard yet. Like a lot of these things were beta programs, even just like 9 months ago or a year ago, when Recharge SMS was pulling in electric SMS as a part of their acquisition into their product. So many merchants were hesitant to test it or do it. But there's a way that you can sort of deploy a testing framework into your process, so that, let's say hypothetically it doesn't work out, you can always pull back. So maybe you only enroll 20% of your customers into this new initiative that you're trying, and then you can even set up calls with the customers to get anecdotal feedback on, like, did you enjoy this experience, did you not? Which leads me down another rabbit hole of, I don't think a lot of brands talk enough to their customers, specifically startups. Like, I'll create a segment in Klaviyo and it'll be a small brand, but they'll still have like hundreds of customers who have ordered from them like 5 or more times. Why are you not talking to some of them? Like, do 5 15-minute discovery calls a week. Like, they obviously love your brand. They're going to be ones who can give you feedback, and then you can get some anecdotal evidence to take out through the rest of your operation. And you'd be shocked at how much customers are willing to share. I mean, I'm not willing to share anything, but most customers are. At least that's what the data says. But even little things like the post-purchase survey, really valuable information that you can glean out of that to feed into how you can create a more custom and personalized customer experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm guilty to say, admittedly, we don't do enough of that here at Nordic either. It is something.
I don't think anybody does. I don't.
Yeah. It is something that I think is often overlooked. But what I'm, as part of my role, I'm really starting to structure kind of what does product management mean here at Nordic, and ideally, future state, I'd have a certain number of hours a week dedicated to discovery of customer issues. And so that could manifest itself in phone calls to VIP customers, that could manifest itself as user recordings from Hotjar or Lucky Orange, that could be analyzing post-purchase survey results, a multitude of things, right, to help really inform us what we should be building to improve the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And there's definitely a way that you can go about it, I would say, sort of incrementally as well. Which I think, how do you do your planning at Nordic? Like, is it yearly? Are you looking at new initiatives on like a quarterly basis, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, are you speaking? I guess, are you referring to marketing initiatives, or are you referring more to like the tech side?
I would say let's do both.
So it's sort of an interesting setup we have here. So I guess, to give the listener context, I sort of fulfill 2 roles. I'm like half D2C e-commerce manager, and the other half I'm a traditional product manager, with a team of developers reporting into me. We have a centralized marketing arm that we work closely with, and they in turn work closely with the brand team to coordinate marketing initiatives. Our input really comes. It's interesting because like our input will come more in the later stages, right? And like how you apply that at the user level, for instance, and that's worked relatively well. So I can't speak too much on the marketing initiative side. What I'll tell you, we talk about building a tech roadmap, and that's, I mean, look, I was not a classically trained product manager, and so a lot of this has been learning on the job and learning from colleagues that very, very talented colleagues that I've worked with in the past, and we've gotten to a place where we've got a fully functioning roadmap that's visible to everyone in the company, and within that is interactive. Folks can look into specific features or products that we're looking to build, and they can read more background on why that product is prioritized the way it is. What's the business case for it? What's the technical complexity, etc. And we work very closely with brand and marketing, as I mentioned, on shuffling that prioritization. Sometimes there are things that are very, in the world of agile, right? If it's easy and it has high business impact, it should go to the top, right? And generally speaking, that's what we try to do. But sometimes there's a third variable, which is time sensitivity, that I think is often overlooked. Sometimes you got a promo that you just have to move it to the front, right? And you need to do something to support that promo. So that's where we work very closely with them on managing that roadmap. And I'm blessed to say I have very strong partners that we coordinate very well together, and they might not be as knowledgeable on the tech side or as knowledgeable on kind of the web behavioral experience side, but they're willing to listen and understand, and understand that like as they do things that I don't understand, I'm doing things that they don't quite understand, and we trust each other.
Yeah, I think that's hard to come by sometimes, though.
It is. It is, and I think like I've been guilty of that too, right? And it's something I've learned. This is sort of getting outside of e-commerce, so I'll try not to belabor it too much.
We can go anywhere, but
great. All right. It's something I've learned in my career, as I've always been I've been a person of action. And sometimes I've had strong opinions, and over time I've sort of developed an understanding, let's say, of not needing to die on every hill. You can die on some, but pick your battles and be okay with it, and that will go a long way for you. In creating those relationships that give and take, right? If you're constantly taking, it's going to be harder to ask for more later.
Yeah, I think two things there. Like one is there's a lot of email warriors. So like on email, I guess you can look at social media too. I mean, people will literally like eviscerate other people with words that they're typing, but then you talk to them and it's like completely different tune, completely different everything. There's those types of people, I think, in the workplace that I've come across sometimes, where it's like, listen, let's just get on the phone, because I'm not going to do this back and forth of like email yelling, essentially. Let's get on the phone and be more collaborative. And then it's like night and day, the difference. And then the second thing is, especially as a manager of other people, it's important to not, because you technically could, like, you could just be like, this is the way we're doing it. This is how you need to do it. I don't really give a shit what you're saying, but this is how you need to do it. That obviously, especially over the course of time, is going to breed a culture that sucks and a team that is not super engaged. it's significantly more positive to be collaborative and try and get them to see it the way that you see it through various means, whether it's more education, showing them the different perspective, and that is really powerful. And it might not always work either,
Right.
but you need to understand that nuance as somebody who is like managing other people. That the way to get things done over the course of like for long-term success is not to just be some sort of like dictator that just pushes out commands. It's very much so, how do you enable your team to be successful and bring their ideas to fruition?
I think this is sort of an age-old management issue, right? Like I think I believe it was Richard Branson that said, hire people that are smarter than you. And that is absolutely true. But it could also backfire if you don't handle it the right way. You can hire, and when I say smarter than you, like let's just make that are better than you in a specific function, right? If you're a leader, you want to hire those folks, but in order for them to succeed, they need to have ownership. Yeah. They need to be allowed to fail. And if they are the right person, they will have success more often than they fail. And you need to give that leeway. You need to delegate that responsibility. Having an environment where it's I actually, this is a perfect example. I was just listening to, there's a podcast called The Sphere. And it's done by the Modern War Institute at West Point. And it's basically just bringing people on to tell stories about their experiences in deployed and in combat. Just recently there was a gentleman on, I don't recall his name, but he was a young lieutenant that got his first platoon, and he was like, man, I was killing it. Everything was great. We were hitting our numbers. Things were going, and he had this perception in his mind that, wow, like I could do no wrong right now. Everything's great. His platoon sergeant pulls him on the side. For those who don't know, platoon sergeant's kind of like the right-hand man of this lieutenant. And this is one of the senior non-commissioned officers. And he says, we got to talk. You're hounding everyone. You're on top of them. You need to give them time to be away from you. In essence, what he's saying is like, you need to delegate and let them fail. They will learn. And to him, it was so far from what his perception was, right? He thought that he was doing so well, and he forgot about this other aspect. And I thought it was just like, wow, I've never been in the military, but like, military is just like going to any other job in some respect, right? Like we face these issues all the time. And so I obviously have been guilty of that as well. And so it's been really great to learn more about like how to give my team ownership. What we say on our team is, I'll give you the what, you figure out the how. This is what the business goal and objective is. I don't need to tell you how, Mr. or Mrs. Tech lead. I don't need to tell you how to accomplish that from a technical perspective and what integrations need to happen. I'm just going to give you the business requirements and you figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I like that though. I give you the what, you give me the how. Because why would you hire people that, like, there's some jobs where I don't know if I would say that actually, but there's certain businesses where it's like you're basically just trying to hire almost robots, it feels like, because you're not getting out of your team what you really could be if you didn't define them into this narrow box and like just force them to do a certain set of things, a certain set of ways. And so I think I give you the what, you give me the how is a beautiful way to engage the team and really extract the maximum value out of them that you should be looking to do anyways if you're hiring somebody. Otherwise, you're wasting both of your time and your money as well. But
yeah, have you are you familiar with the book Drive by Daniel Pink?
what is it called? Drive?
It's called Drive. I
Okay.
highly recommend this read for people that are managing, and even if you're not managing. It's about sort of what innately drives humans, at least some humans. It starts with kind of talking about an experiment where monkeys were given problems to solve, and some of them were given incentives to solve those problems, and there was another group that was not given incentives to solve those problems, and they actually found that the group that was not given incentives actually solved problems faster and with higher complexity. And so it dives into this idea of like what drives human, innate human instinct to solve problems. And it's extremely fascinating. I think the takeaway there is like, back to the ownership thing. If you're not giving people the ability to solve problems, and letting them free of special incentive, right? Like, don't get me wrong, people want to be paid a fair wage and recognized. But if you give them that avenue to solve those problems, there's just something innately satisfying.
Yeah, I think that is something that is not baked into a lot of, and frankly, I'm going to go read this book because I'm trying to read like one book a week, and I would not have expected that's the answer. That the non-incentivized group would actually perform better.
It's extremely fascinating. I highly recommend it. Would love to hear your thoughts after you read it. I've actually thought recently about giving it another reread because it has been a while. But yeah, definitely would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I will let you know. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've kept you plenty, but thank you for coming. Is there anything, last tips, tricks, last comment you want to get out there to anybody that is listening?
Yeah, there is one thing I'd say. My presumption is there's a lot of folks that have sort of this similar entrepreneurial drive that'd be listening to this podcast, and I would say that when you do what you love, you still need to the line between personal and professional becomes much more blurred. That doesn't mean that it doesn't still take a toll on you. You need to be more proactive in separating out your personal life and separating away from the day-to-day grind of running a business or creating a product. It's still so important to give yourself, your mind, your body that space. I've learned that the hard way. And I just was hoping to impart a little bit of that wisdom to your listeners.
Yes. No, I think we can all use that reminder. I myself, for sure, will be taking that as a takeaway here. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Can you let everybody know where they can find you online if they want to connect?
Yeah, sure. Anyone's welcome to send me a connect on LinkedIn. I believe it's /M or /M Charleston. Yeah, that's probably the best way, actually.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Brandon, I appreciate the time.
Of course. Well, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.